Okay, looks like we'll go ahead and get started here. I think people will be kind of logging on for the next several minutes. But I'm Lee Leopard. I'm the Senior Creative Manager here at the Cromeens Law Firm. And we just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. Very excited to have you here. And today we have Miss Karalynn Cromeens. She's a published author, award-winning lawyer, and is the owner and seasoned managing partner of the Cromeens Law Firm, as well as the owner and founder of the Subcontractor Institute. She comes from a background of construction and has practiced construction law and real estate law as well for the last 17 years, and has really made it her personal mission to educate contractors across the state of Texas as well as nationwide. And anyone in the construction industry knows how difficult it can be to collect hard-earned money, and has dealt with the pain of that, sometimes with the unfortunate case of missing out on payment. And getting paid for your company's work is really the whole reason you're in business. So if you're having cash flow problems, the first place you really need to look at is your collection strategy. So important to understand the steps it takes to create that strong legal safety net for your company. And today, Karalynn will be walking you through everything you need to know to be preventative in your construction business and create that legal safety net with a successful collections plan. So she'll be here to give you clear instructions on the actions you must take to protect your rights, how to create that consistent collection strategy, what that is, and how to collect the money you're owed on all of your projects. A couple housekeeping things. Please stay muted during the presentation. And don't forget that the fill in the blank handout that I sent out earlier today and yesterday. You can fill in the blanks as we go through the presentation today. And we will be having a Q&A at the end, so you can ask Karalynn any and all questions you have. Feel free to unmute yourself at that point. You can send me any direct message in the chat, and I will ask her for you. And go ahead and take away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thank you guys so much for being here as we dive into a very important topic about, successful collection strategies. And I have to say before we jump into this, I got really good at doing this and filing liens, specifically in Texas, because in my last year of law school, my husband and I opened a material supply company. In order to protect our rights to get paid, I had to learn and understand the lien laws, which in Texas is very complicated. I wrote a book all about it called Quick Getting Stiffed, which is just the lien laws in Texas. And then on the other note is that lien laws are different in all 50 states. But today we're going to dive in specifically what Texas looks like and why it's so important to know your lien rights and what a lien is. All right, so being in business, right? The whole point of being in business is you work and then you get paid, right? And what a lien is a way to secure the amounts that you're owed, right? You do the work, and the lien process is a part of a consistent collection strategy, which is based on a couple of factors. Next slide. So because the construction industry runs on credit, meaning that you work, you provide labor and material, and then you wait to get paid, the lien is a way to secure that debt. So what does that mean? There are two types of debt and or credit that is extended, right? When you provide labor and material, wait to get paid, you've extended the person you're working for credit. And if you do that on a contract, that is unsecured debt. So say same thing like if you get a Home Depot credit card and you charge up that Home Depot credit card, they have to sue you and then get a judgment and try to collect. So that's an unsecured debt, as opposed to a secure debt, which is very similar to like a mortgage on your house. Like if you can't afford to pay cash for a house, you go to the bank and say, hey, I'm going to borrow money to buy this house, and they take back a lien on the house. And if you don't pay that, if you don't pay the bank for the amount that they owe them for the property, they'll foreclose on that note and then sell the property to satisfy the amount that you owe them. And so what a lien does is creates that secured interest. So you, the lien holder, will have an interest in the property where you supplied labor and material, and now you become a secured debt. So one important thing too is like when you file your lien, you have a secured claim, but you also still have your unsecured claim, which is your breach of contract against whoever hired you, whether that's the owner or general contractor or somebody different. So you could have both at the same time, but the preferred remedy and the way the remedy with most leverage is the secured remedy, which is the lien. All right, so what you need to know before you can put together a consistent collection strategy is what is in your contract. Is there a pay when paid clause that's going to affect the timing of your payment? You know, if you're a residential contractor, what do you put in your contract for when you're entitled to be paid? And then know your lien rights in every state, at whatever state you're working in. So today we're going to go over Texas, but knowing your lien rights is an important part to building that collection strategy. So what does a successful collection strategy look like? Well, it takes into consideration two things. The cash flow requirements of the company, meaning how long can your company go for by working and then waiting to get paid, and then the steps required to have a valid lien. So those two kind of work together to make the consistent collection strategy. Those are the two things you need to take into account. So, like I said, next slide. How long, so if you have a pay when paid clause, how long can you go for without being paid? And then knowing your rights, the lien rights. And here's the thing, the rules for liens are different in all 50 states, but one thing is the same. You can always send notice early. So even though, like, if you're a subcontractor in Texas, the first notice you need to send is the 15th day of the 3rd month after you're owed money for. You could always send it earlier. If your cash flow requires you to send it earlier, you can absolutely do that. You just can't send it late. So that's how the two work together. And in some states, you have a requirement to do a pre-lien notice within the first 20 days or whatever of working on a project. So if you plan to have lien rights, then you need to know that in advance so you can make sure and you send that out in the state that's required. So we're going to dive into some of the lien basics for Texas. So these are the rules specifically for Texas. Texas has two types of liens. One is a constitutional lien, which is provided by the Texas Constitution. It basically says if you're hired by the owner of a property, you have lien rights, right? And there's really not a whole lot of notices or anything required to have that. You just have to file it. And then there's this other type of lien called a statutory lien, which means it's provided for in the Constitution, but more thoroughly described in the laws of Texas. And specifically in Texas, it's under Chapter 53 of the Texas Property Code. And it says, okay, if you are not hired directly by the owner, there's all these other steps you need to follow to have a valid lien. Some of which are notices, some of which about what time you have, the time frame you have to file the lien. And so that's called a statutory lien. And it's got a lot more steps than a constitutional lien. So if you have a constitutional lien, you just have to file it. You don't have to send any extra notice or anything like that. But statutory lien, you're going to have to follow all of these requirements. And what we're about to dive into is what's required for a statutory lien. So the first part of knowing how to have a statutory lien or perfected lien in Texas and in most states is knowing your place. And when I say knowing your place in the construction food chain, which we'll get to in a second, and the type of project, right? Whether that's a public works job, a private project, residential, commercial. And so you need to know those two things before you can decide what steps you need to take to have a valid lien. So knowing your place. So this is what I like to call the construction food chain, right? And so you have the owner at the top, the owner hires the general hires a sub, and the sub either hires a sub or material supplier or does the work themselves, right? And so like we were just going over a constitutional lien. So a person in the place one position, what we normally refer to as a general contractor, has a constitutional lien right. And it used to be there was really no time frame on when that lien had to be filed. But for original contracts signed on or after January 1st of 2022, there is now a timeline on when those liens have to be filed. So on residential projects, the lien must be filed the 15th day of the 3rd month after all work has been completed by the general. And on commercial projects, it's the 15th day of the 4th month. So that's some of our new updates to the new Texas lien law. But just in general, knowing your place is important to knowing what the first steps you need to take to have a valid lien. Okay, so the first action you have to take is based on what place you are. And the further down you are, the further away you are from the owner, the more likely you're going to have to act sooner. Why? Because the whole point of the statute, okay, so Having a lien on somebody's property is a very extreme remedy. Like I said, the remedy, the ultimate remedy is foreclosure of that lien and sale of the property to satisfy the amount that you're owed. And that is an extreme remedy. So in order to have that remedy or that right, we have to send proper notices, especially for like, and you know, the owners at the top, they don't know who the people are at place 2 or place 3. And so the further you are down the food chain, the more likely it is that you would have to send notices sooner. So like currently place 2 is the 15th day of the 3rd month that you need to send notice to the owner and the general contractor, right? And then for people in place 3 and below that, it's the 15th day of the 2nd month, which has now changed after for original contract signed January 1st, 22 or after, the place 2 and place 3 are now all at the 15th day of the 3rd month. But unless you're that original contractor, it's really hard for you to tell when the original contract was signed. So I'm telling all of my clients, at least for this year, we're going to be under the old rules just to be sure, because it's just sending extra notice. So another thing that has to do with the timing of notice and filing liens is your project types. These are the different types of projects in Texas. So you have a homestead, which is a residential property that someone is living in on a full-time basis. You can only have one homestead at a time in Texas. And there are a lot of heavy rules that are involved with having a proper lien on a homestead in Texas. So we don't dive into that today, but if you have further questions, you can let me know. We can dive into that. A residence under residential, the important thing about this is that it's owned by one or more persons, not an entity. So even if a project is like a house or something residential and it's owned by an entity like a business, it's not considered residential, it's considered commercial. So residential is all the way up to a quadruplex and it's owned by one or more person who intends to stay in the building, right? Commercial are all their projects that don't fit in anywhere else. Texas Public Works are, you know, libraries, fire stations, tech dot projects, all of that is will be bonded because you can't have a lien on government jobs. And then federal projects are your Air Force bases, stuff like that. And that's actually under the Miller Act, which is something completely different. But you need to know it's that type of project. So you need to know who and when to send notice to. So those are the different types in Texas. There's also this cool thing in Texas called a sham contract. And it's a way to get to be a place 1 contractor if you're a place 2 contractor or below. So what the rule says is that if the owner and the general contractor, although they might be 2 different companies, if they are controlled by the same people, they're considered one. And then even if you're in place 2, you're hired by the general, you now have a constitutional lien and all of those notice requirements no longer apply to you. So it's a way that sometimes if you think you've missed a notice, you could get around it by the fact that a notice is not required if there is a sham contract. So always something to look at. If for some reason you think you're outside of your timelines, we may have a constitutional lien based on the sham contract theory. These are the technical requirements of what must be in a lien when it's filed. So you have to know who the owner is and the address and the name for the owner. You know, the statement of the kind of the work you did, the months that you did the work, the last known address for the general contractor to place 1 contractor, the legal description of the property. The lien must include your name and address. The lien must state the date you sent notices. And if it's on a homestead, it needs to have that notice that this is not a lien, this is only an affidavit claiming a lien. So all of those things must be in a lien. And like I said, guys, this is such an extreme remedy. If we even miss one of those things, our lien could be found invalid, and there's can be heavy penalties if we file a lien that's not valid. All right, so let's dive into the actual notices. Okay. So the notices, like I said, are a chance to give the people, the owner and the general contractor, a chance to make sure everyone further down the food chain is paid before a lien is filed. So, and you know, like at the owner, letting them know that, hey, I'm here, I haven't been paid, so they can make sure that you get paid before they pay the general contractor and that they don't have to pay twice, right? So this whole thing is to try to prevent, you know, having the owner having to pay twice and, you know, giving you lien right if that's possible, right? A secured remedy. So like I said, the timelines for one of the big misconceptions I see for the lien timelines is that you go from the last time you supplied materials. And in some states it's that way, and the timeline for filing your lien is from the last time. But the timeline from notices goes from the first time you supplied material that you remain unpaid. So if you are working in January and February, the timeline to send notice if you're unpaid for January runs from January. And each month has got to stand on its own that said you sent the correct notice, sent at the right time to the right people. So, but know that it comes from the first time you're owed money, not the last time you're owed money. So very important. So some important things to do before you decide to extend credit, just so you know what your lien rights are and what to do if you have to file a lien. We need to research to find the correct addresses to send notice for the owner, the general contractor. Triple check the addresses. There's a couple places that you can check. HCAD is any kind of a county CAD that has keeps track of property records is a great place to look for ownership information and correct addresses for the owners. Secretary of State, if it's a business, will also be a great place to check for addresses. And then each county has assumed name records. You can look there as well. Post office, take your letter to the post office to be stamped. The current rules are if the deadline falls on a weekend or a holiday, you have to do it the day before. For contracts signed on or after January 1st, 2022, they actually give you the grace period till the next day. Like I said, each month you provide labor material must meet its own requirements. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with sending notice early and often. So there was some big updates to the Texas lien laws. We kind of talked about some of them already, but there's some other big ones that we need to talk about. So it used to be you could only send things certified mail. Now through the post office, now you can use any company that can confirm proof of receipt. So that's FedEx, UPS, anything like that. So now it's kind of opened that up. Your deadline falls on a legal holiday or a weekend, move to the next business day. There's more of a specific form required for notice that's in the statute, and the specific notice for unpaid retainage as well. All right, so these are the big updates. So it used to be that place two contractor and place two contractor had to send the 15th day of the third month. That stays the same, but it also used to be the place three contractor had to send a notice the month before that to the general contractor. So like a sub or material supplier had to send a statement to the general contractor only that it remained unpaid on the 15th day of the second month. Under the new rules, the place three contractor no longer has to do that. They're moved up. They only have to send one notice the 15th day of the third month. Most of my material supplier clients say that the GC statements what's get them paid, so they're going to continue to send that just because of a cash flow issue. So right there, even if the law doesn't require, we're still going to do it because that's what gets us paid, and it would hurt our cash flow if we changed our notices, even if it's not required by the law. Make sure we have the language in the letter required to trap funds, which we'll get into here in a second. If you're filing on a lien on a leasehold, we need to ask for a copy of the lease to see if we can have a lien on the whole property or just the lease. All right, the lien needs to be filed the 15th day of the fourth month or within 30 days of final completion. That's for commercial projects or whichever come first. And that's for commercial projects. I mean, that's for constitutional projects. It used to be if you had a constitutional lien, there wasn't a deadline to file your lien. Now there is. So the 15th day of the fourth month on commercial projects for constitutional liens, on 15th day of the third month on residential projects for constitutional liens. You need to send out a notice within 5 days after you filed it. An important thing, don't let promises of payment push you outside of your deadlines. All right, next slide, Lee. So this is the biggest change that we've had to Texas lien law in over 20 years. I can't say it's done a whole lot to make it easier. I think taking out the 15th day of the second month notice was probably not a good idea because it gives the general contractor time to pay, but I'm not quite sure what they were thinking, but I guess we'll see how it works out. And some other big changes that they made is that, okay, so it used to be that the owner had to withhold 10% until 30 days after final completion, and that was called retainage. Okay, so now under the new laws, that's not called retainage anymore. So if it's required under a contract, 10% of your contract amount in a contract, that's considered retainage. But there's one good change. There's some good changes though. It used to be you had to file your retainage lien within 30 days of final completion, right? And so now that's changed, is you need to send a notice within 30 days of final completion, but you have until the 15th day, the third month after completion, to file your lien, which means you're not rushing to file your lien at the end of the job. And that way you have time to file it to make sure you get paid. You now get 30 days notice of a hearing to remove an invalid lien. It used to be 21. Again, I think this was on the laws before, but only lien waivers that are approved, that are spelled out in a statute, are effective to waive your lien rights. In 2011, Texas made the lien waivers statutory, so it's conditional upon progress, unconditional upon progress, conditional upon final, and unconditional upon final. And if you need those forms, you can go to Subcontractor Institute. We have them for free. I also teach a class on when and how to use them for free there. But those are the only forms that are effective to waive your lien rights. If you sign something else, it probably is not going to be effective to waive your lien rights, meaning you could still have a claim even though you signed a lien waiver. Okay, so we kind of went over the place 3 contractor no longer has to send the 15th day of the second month notice. And so the new retainage, which is not retainage anymore, is called reserved funds. So the owner still has the requirement of withholding 10% for 30 days upon final completion, but now it's called reserved funds. One thing I want to point out is that the rules are different in all 50 states, and the penalties are pretty high for filing an invalid lien. So I'd be very leery of using an online service for filing liens, just because it's so specific and because the penalties can be so high, right? You're talking about, I had a client that was just hit with the other side's attorney's fees of $100,000 plus a $10,000 penalty for fraudulent lien. So this is not only would you lose the amount that you owed, the amount that you filed the lien for, now you're on the hook because you caused damages to somebody else with an invalid lien. So some things you need to hire a collection law firm, and here's some questions how you can ask them. You know, how often are you successful at collecting funds without filing a lien? All right, so what is retainage? Retainage currently under the new law is what's provided for in the contract as 10% or whatever that amount is. And you now have a longer time period to file your lien for retainage, which is the 15th day of the third month, as opposed to, it used to be 30 days of final completion. Now the new retainage is called reserve funds. So the owner still has the obligation to withhold 10%, but now it's referred to reserve funds. And so if you want to lien on reserve funds, you have to file your lien within 30 days after final completion. And so reserve funds, just like retainage, was a way for the owner to limit its liability. So if a owner properly withholds reserve funds for 30 days after final completion, they're only liable for that 10%. So if they have lien claimants that exceed the 10%, those lien claimants have to share pro rata in the amount of the 10%, right? So that still applies. But so on reserve funds, you still have to file your lien within 30 days of final completion. Make sure that you file a lien to collect retainage and or reserve funds. And the big, huge thing about retainage is, next slide, please. 10% of a project is probably your profit. If you're making more than 10% on a contract, then you're doing really well. But most of the time, that 10% is a profit. So walking away from that basically means that you worked for free, or you paid them to go to work. So I always recommend to my guys that you build in the cost of filing a lien for retainage into your contract amount. And then just file. There's nothing wrong with filing a retainage lien early, so you can file it when you're done and just say, hey, retainage lien, I'm not actually owed this yet, but I'm just going to file this, and when retainage is due, I've already have that done. And what that'll do is put you at the front of the line to get paid out of retainage. So you can increase the owner's liability to more than the 10% of reserve funds by sending a letter that has fund trapping language. And so what that means is, yes, the owner is only liable for that 10%, but if you send a letter to him including the following language, which is on the next slide, which tells him to withhold the amount that you're owed from the general contractor, and he pays it anyways, now he's liable for the 10% plus the amount that he paid. So we can increase that 10% liability on the owner. So which is why it's also a good idea to send notice early, because the earlier you send notice, the more likely the owner is to have funds due to the general contractor still. So I would put that in all the notices that you send out, regardless of timelines. Like I said, you can send it early, trap the funds, and to make sure that you're going to get paid. Like I said, if we do this collection process properly, very rarely should you have to file a lien, because we're sending notices, we're making the phone calls, we're making sure that everyone gets paid. And that's what the owners, the owner's running a construction project, his job and the general contractor's job is to make sure everybody gets paid. All right, and so like it or not, if you're in construction, you need a law firm to back you up. And that's for all things, not just collections. So yes, we do have collections, which is a huge part of it, but we help you with defect claims, we help you with employee issues, employee handbooks, all of the things that could happen. I mean, and you never know what kind of situation that'll arise that you're going to need help on. If you get back charged for something unfairly, or you did work without a signed change order, can you still get paid for that? All of those are things that we're here to help with, right? And so finding that person before you need them is key, right? Go and interview people, see if they talk. The big thing is, do they talk your language? Do they understand the construction industry? Because what I learned when I got into it is there are very few lawyers that do. There's some really good general practice lawyers, but there are very few lawyers that understand the construction industry, which is the thing onto its own. Like no other business is run this way, pay apps and lien waivers, and it's very specific. And so for somebody that's not familiar with to try to do it, it's going to be not the most effective way. And so like what my firm offers is what's called a couple of different options on payment. And so one of our most common things is a general retainer, which basically, and so it's $2,500 here, and it basically puts us on file to be your in-house counsel. You have any questions, you get a demand letter, you just reach out to us, and the same day we'll respond with here's a plan, or we'll get back to you on how we're going to handle this. But that way you don't have to open a retainer for each matter. You just have one little thing. You want a phone call, an idea to talk things through. We're here to help. And so interview lawyers, right? You can call us. There's other law firms out there. Find one that clicks with you, but do this before you have any issues. And then that they're there, you can call and pick up the phone, because trying to find somebody after you have gotten a demand letter and you're all flustered and you're trying to rush into something because it takes a minute, is probably not what's best for your business. We also offer a legal subscription plan that has a bunch of different levels. So we have it starting at $1,000 a month, depending on what you need. We have contract review on a flat fee, collections, all of that, employee handbooks on a flat fee. So all of that, I've really designed my company to be a law firm for what I like to call the get shit done tribe. That's people who are in the construction industry, who build things and get things done, and who need the backup. Like, I need a new contractor. Can you review the subcontract and tell me what it means? Or can you review this document I already signed and tell me what I agree to? In plain English, right? So what does this mean? And that's what we're really good at. And that's what any attorney you hire should be really good at. They should be able, and they should be able to help you with your issues and talk about it in a way that you understand. So I think that's all the things that I have. That's a lot, I know. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now. Lee, can you put in the email if you want to set up a consultation? Lee will put the email in the chat so we can set up a one. Sorry. Thought I
All
forgot.
right, so as Carolyn just asked, I'm going to put in email address for you if you're interested in asking, setting up a free consult, asking any questions to Carolyn via, you can send us an email afterwards, or I'm also going to be following up, sending the full presentation so you can fill in any blanks that you may have missed. We also will be, this session has been recorded, so we'll be sending this out on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to reference this. And then again, we are here to help you. So I'm sending Chelsea's information right now. You can reach out to her. And again, I will be sending an email so you can reach out to me as well directly. Let's see. All right. Any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself. You can ask Karalynn directly, or you can send a message in the chat and I'll ask her for you.
No, that was a lot of information. Liens are kind of complicated thing, but we can talk about it here.
It's always a it's a bulky subject, but it's so crucial and it's so important to understand. And yeah, it's, I mean, Karalynn, do you have like a horror story you could share?
Well,
Put you on the spot for one, but I know you have a lot under your belt with people that have helped in the past.
Well, and it's like I said, a lien is leverage, and you can create that just by notices. It's a lot of information, I know, but it's so important, right? Notices, and it can really save your ass, and by sending notices and making phone calls. The main thing is to plan on what it is, looks on the front end, so that way we don't get in a bind and we're scrambling to try to figure this out.
Right.
Webinar for bonded projects. Okay, so it really kind of depends on if we're talking about Texas bonded projects. We pretty much follow the same notices as for the statutory liens, except instead of sending it to the owner, we send it to the bonding company, which the big issue there is getting a copy of the bond before we start the work, right? Because the bonds aren't required to be filed anywhere. And so if there's an issue, it's really hard to get it because you got to get it from the general contractor. So you can, get that at the beginning of the project, or what I do too for my guys is we send out that GC statement, the 15th day of the second month notice to the general contractor, letting them know how much we're owed. And we also put a bond request in that notice so that if we need it the next month, which is the 15th day of the third month that you're owed money for, that you got to send that notice to the GC and the bond company, we've already requested it. And then we're like, because you have to give them 10 days notice if you request it. And we're like, hey, can you send us the bond? Now they're like, oh, you got to give us 10 days notice. And actually, we sent you that notice a month ago, so you're actually late in sending it to us. So that's basically what you have to do on a Texas public work project, right? So on a federal project, the Miller Act, you have to send notice to the bond company in 90 days after last work. And at the federal level, there is, and I think it's on the website. If not, I know it's in Quit Getting Stiffed. There is a government entity you can reach out to get a copy of the bond even before you start work. So pretty much for Texas, we follow the same timelines. It is, you don't end up filing a lien, you end up sending a verified bond claim. Oh, I guess always my favorite ones with liens where we're like, everybody getting mad at me and yell at me, tell me, I'm not going to pay you, do what you got to do. And so I file a lien and I just sit for a while, and then I end up getting paid everything I'm owed because they don't really realize what a lien is or what it can do. And even if you let your liens, so liens under the new statute, all of them are only good for a year, which means you have to file suit to enforce them within a year of them being filed. So you got some time to sit on them. And most projects, if it's new construction, while they're building it, are in what's called construction financing, which means they might not be paying anything, or they might just be paying interest. And then before the project can go to permanent financing, there's another closing. And if that happens, the title company is going to pull the record of the title. And if there's liens filed in between the time they started the project and the time they finish the project, those have to be paid off by the time the project goes to, before it goes to permanent financing. So there's some leverage. And that's what a lien does. It stops you from selling it or getting a new loan on it without taking care of the lien holders.
Mhm. And you actually did some, I'm forgetting who officially started the lien. Was it Jefferson? Who?
Yes, Thomas
Okay.
Jefferson started the lien in America because he wanted people to come work on the Capitol building, and nobody wanted to because they were afraid that they wouldn't get paid by this new government because we're just starting out, and so he gave them lien rights. And I think lien rights came from England, but they brought them over here to promote people to build the Capitol building and get stuff done. So that's how long established they are here, and that's how
Crazy.
important it is in this country's history to make sure that people that provide labor and material get paid, because that's what this country is founded on.
Absolutely. We want you paid. You deserve to be paid. Everyone's so hardworking
Yep.
in this industry. It's crazy.
All right, guys. Well, feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Like I said, Lee will bring up sending you an email of all of this stuff, and then you can set up a time to talk if you have further questions, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.